Welcome to Authors on the Air. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I want to just say first that the ALA, the American Library Association, just released a statement about 7 days ago stating that banned books increased so much in 2022 that they were horrified to see that it went up 38%, that over 2,200 books have now been banned around different libraries and in schools. This year promises to almost double that. I am very honored to have with me today Claudia Johnson, who was the original crusader for banned books in the 80s. Claudia, welcome to Authors on the Air. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pam. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, it's amazing that you've just released and updated your book, Stifled Laughter, about your crusade against banned books in the 80s. It's a very timely and relevant book. Can you please just kick us off with something from your book?
Absolutely. I'll kick us off from the moment when I knew I had to be involved. How about that?
Okay, that sounds
great. It is the opening scene of chapter 1 of Stifled Laughter. March 8th, 1986. I'm sitting by my father's pool in South Florida. It's a pleasant spring night. The mullet are jumping in the deep water canal beyond the pool's screened enclosure. My husband, the folklorist Orman Loomis, is regaling my father about life in Lake City, the small North Florida town where we live. Anne and Ross, our 2 children, are already sleeping. I lean back, close my eyes, let the ice from my Scotch mist melt on my tongue. I've just passed my doctoral exams in English at Florida State, 6 months of nothing but study, stacks of books and 3x5 cards, soup to nuts. The Greeks to the present, I'm tired. Orman mentions a minister back in Lake City, a man named Fritz Fountain, who wants the school board to ban the high school humanities textbook because 2 selections, Lysistrata and The Miller's Tale, promote, in the preacher's opinion, women's lib and pornography. I set down my Scotch mist and snap. He did what? It's one of those moments that keeps me guessing about a great design. After reading more than 200 plays for my exams, I decided that Lysistrata is the finest stage comedy ever written, a rare breed of play where women are victors, not victims. And The Miller's Tale, as Orman well knows, is the reason I'm studying English at all. He's heard the story so often, he likes to say that he could motif it. I can tell by the look on his face, those brown eyes getting bigger, that he knows what I'm thinking. Oh, don't get involved, he says. Please don't get involved. There'll be burning crosses in our front yard.
Wow. It's interesting how we become advocates for something that affects us like that. It has to be something personal for you to really advocate and for you to really raise your voice. True. What happened after you had that conversation with Orman?
We dropped the subject, and that was at my dad's in Stuart, Florida, and we drove back to Lake City and didn't bring it up again until the next day when my friend Susan Davis phoned me, and she said, had I seen the newspaper with, Fritz Fountain's complaints about the high school humanities textbook. And I said I had, and she said, well, what are we going to do? And she and 2 other parents, Jim and Manya Virgil, we joined forces, but we were the only people in town who would show up and speak out at the school board meeting. And the board banned the entire humanities textbook because there was no one there, just the 3 of us to support it, the 4 of us. And it was the next day, all copies were confiscated and locked in the book room at the high school. And then the pall of orthodoxy descended on education in Live Oak. One teacher said, I'd like to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, but I know I don't dare. A middle school teacher said, I don't teach literature anymore. My students just do grammar. And it's just tragic. There's always collateral damage. They're banned.
There really is. And I remember so much my humanities classes in what is now called middle school, but then junior high, and of course in high school and then on to college, were some of my favorite. And they made me imagine. They created excitement in me. I wanted to visit different worlds and experience different creative aspects of all the people that I read about. And I had already been a big reader. So, but I don't remember books being banned at that time. I was out of school, so I would have been out of college and all in the 80s when that happened. And I don't ever remember seeing banned books until more recently, more in current history. So the fight begins again, but the fight is a little bit nastier now, because not only is it someone talking about women's lib, but now people of color and the LGBTQ community and some very mainstream authors like Toni Morrison and Jodi Picoult are having their books banned. And it scares me. And tell me how you feel about this, because one parent can say, I don't like that book and I want it removed from the library. What about the parents who don't want it removed from the library?
Well, you have touched a nerve, because the parental rights movement, which, Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia kind of kicked off, it's a minority of parents. Those of us who want education to be full and, books not to be banned, we are in the majority. And so what I want to yell when I see them on TV or on the streets, I just want to yell, you're not the only parents. Parental rights movement, we have to just keep that out there. There is no such thing as a parental rights movement that corners the market on the way that education should be. And yes, it has gotten so much nastier now. And they're going after communities of color and LGBTQ, because the rabid right is rabid to erase them. That's what they're doing. And they do it under the guise of, oh, we don't want anything divisive in our schools. And what can be more divisive than banning books and locking them up?
Well, it seems to me that every time I hear about a parental rights law, I always think parents already have rights. You don't need to legislate those rights, because if you are, you're legislating against another set of parents' rights. So if you don't want your kids to be on social media, like banning TikTok or forcing children to give personal information before they can go on TikTok or any of these other medias, you're opening up a whole nother dirty bag of worms there. You're allowing children's personal information to go. You're negating parents' control over their students who may know, or their children who may very well know and may monitor their behaviors on social media and what books they read. So where do you draw the line, Claudia? Where do we stop it and say, wait, the statue of David was built to be in a chapel, a house of worship,
right,
and then was found to be so exquisite that they moved it in the public arena so people could admire the gorgeous work of Michelangelo. It's confusing to me. I mean, I don't know how someone thinks they can legislate behavior, but yet they're trying. Why is that, Claudia?
Because there is a small college in Michigan called Hillsdale College with a right-wing think tank, which has announced in plain sight their marching orders. And they are, I have them right here so I could share them with you. This is a quote from Catherine Joyce's 3-part article in Salon. So she says, quote, marching orders for the right, defund public education, discard academic freedom, remove credentialing requirements for K through 12 teachers, and generally foster so much anger against public schools that it drives a nationwide movement to privatize education. And so, but let me get to the really horrifying part of that. That's their strategy. Books are the first movement in their dark and terrible long game, which is public education is the bedrock of democracy. So once it's privatized, they can install, and they're doing this out of Hillsdale College, a theocratic curriculum. And then once that is installed, public education will not be funded because people who go to private schools can take that money with them. And then their long game is to destroy our democracy. They've announced it publicly, and they're doing it in plain sight, and replace democracy with theocracy.
Here's the
so
thing.
Dark. It is so fascist and so dark. But we're seeing those marching orders being replicated, of course, Florida, but Texas, and I think Montana. Others are beginning to pick up on the right-wing agenda, the rabid right-wing agenda, and execute it there. And it is democracy is on the ballot. Democracy is on the chopping block, and they don't even mince words about it.
Yeah. I want to hear more about how you changed it up in the 80s when these two books led to the banning of the humanities text, and what you did to fight it.
We, Manya, and Jim Virgil and Susan Davis and myself, we talked to people in town in Lake City. A number of people said to us, we are shocked by the ban and we are on your side. And we said, great, come to the next school board meeting and say so in public. Not one person would do it. And Susan Davis Riley summed up their reaction. She said, short of doing something, what can we do? And that was the end of the story in Lake City, because if we could have gotten a big crowd of people to go and speak out, things might have changed, because school boards are elected and political power is really the only thing that speaks to them. So we were out of options until one day I got a phone call from a gentleman who was putting together a PBS panel about the First Amendment in the classroom. And he asked me if, he'd seen my name in the Jacksonville paper and would I come and be part of the PBS panel. So I said yes. And at the end of the conversation, he said, I'm surprised the ACLU hasn't gotten, involved in this. And, I wasn't about to admit to him that I hadn't even thought about that, because, there's no listing for the ACLU in the Lake City phone book, right? But we got in touch with the Miami chapter, and they took the case, and we took the school board to federal court. But really what people need to know is, you don't always succeed in court, but if you can put together a grassroots coalition in your town, really all politics are local, and book banning politics are particularly local. And if you show up and speak out, it makes a difference, as the next two cases that I talk about that I fought. The new introduction to STIFLED actually talks about 2021 here in Virginia Beach.
Right.
And
I'd like you to talk about that one too, because it's important to understand that there is a history going on. Yeah, it's still going on. There's a history of book banning, and it's only getting worse. And only by becoming part of the collective voice against banning books, against banning anything or canceling anyone or denying someone rights, you have to be part of that collective force. Your voice must count. Tell us about 2021, please.
in so in October 2021, and then we can come back to Live Oak, which is also an important part of the story. But in 2021, when I thought, I'm done with book banning, my son Ross texted me the front page of the Virginian Pilot, our local paper in Virginia Beach. And, the headline was 2 school board members, not parents, school board members had asked the board, they had asked 6 books be removed. They were the usual suspects: Bluest Eye, Lesson Before Dying, Lawn Boy, and others, genderqueer. And so I read this and I thought, no, not again. And Ross said, he's a grown man now. He said, Mom, I said, should I go to the meeting and speak out? He said, you have to. You have the credentials and, the experience. And
Right.
of course, I had to go. It was the height of the pandemic. We had to sit. There were 8 seats between people at the school board meeting. So I went very early so I would get a seat. And I felt my job was to say the First Amendment protects students' right to receive information codified by the PICO decision at the Supreme Court. But what was so dazzling and so inspiring, Pam, was one high school student after another. You had to sign up to speak, and their names were called because not all of us could be in the room. One after another, when their name was called, spoke out passionately for the difference in their lives that these books had made.
Wow.
And there were more than a dozen, and it was phenomenal. And all 6 books were reinstated. And
so maybe that's what we have to do, is we have to get
that's what I mean by show up and speak out.
Yeah, the kids who are affected by this ban, because parents really aren't affected in the same way the kids are. The kids are the losers here. And and so hopefully, particularly middle school and high school students and college students even, are aware that their voices matter in this fight, along with their parents, and their parents encourage them to be part of the pushback on banning books and banning anything. So, excuse me.
If we don't push back, we get the country,
we deserve. Yeah, we
deserve.
Really do.
We really do.
If we let it go and it's not my fight, I don't have a kid in school, it is everybody's fight. I have always maintained that I would prefer living in an educated community than one that isn't. An educated community is one who will find jobs, will find housing, will not be a drain on local and state taxes. They are a happier community. The rising tide lifts all ships, or, to paraphrase. So community is our first defense against hate and anger and intolerance. So, it's really scary now. It's scary as someone who loves books. I don't have a television, as you know. So, I want to scream for everyone to get on board and say, we have to stop this. We have to let our voices be heard, and stop legislating parenting. Stop telling me what my grandkids can read or not. Their parents and I are on board with the same thing. My grandparents' mom is an educator. She would never think to ban a book or not allow it. It's anathema to us.
It is. I mean, books were sacred in the house where I was raised. I'm a writer, so books are still sacred to me.
Absolutely.
And, in the public schools, books are carefully chosen by learned educators, teachers, librarians. And this whole heckler effect, where one parent can go in, like the Mom for Liberty in Martin County, and said, I don't like these 78 books, which, by the way, she had not read, and they never have read them. And we need to put our foot down and have school boards put into their procedures that no one can challenge a book until they can, sign an affidavit or take a quiz that shows that they have read it in its entirety.
What they're offended by, right?
Right.
What's the passage that offends you the most? I'd like to know that, and tell me why. How has it affected your life, and how will it change your child? Is really, to me, the meat of the argument. Why do you think this is happening? How will it change? How will it be detrimental to your child to read that? But there's a lot of canceling going on.
If I may say, the part that they're offended by, they haven't read it. So they either flip through it until they find a passage about sexuality, but mostly social media is the accelerant. And they are getting this off social media because they're all complaining about the same thing. And, so I have no respect for anyone who bans a book that they have not read.
Well, I don't have any respect for someone who bans a book even if they've read it.
That's
Quite
right.
frankly, it's freedom of speech.
Yes.
Freedom of speech and expression. I may not want to read the book, but I sure will support your right to go ahead and write it and publish it and have it out there in the ether. May not be my cup of tea, but that and that goes with every mainstream writer that I read. So it may not be for me, but it's for somebody, and that somebody deserves their chance to go ahead and have their book out there.
And they got the jump on us, being louder and they took over school boards. We need to take back school boards. There's a very important website, I don't know what people's politics are, but this is so helpful. It's called progressivevotersguide.com. And you can put in your zip code and it will list everyone who's running for the school board, for example, and if they're for book banning or not. And that's the first thing after showing up and speaking out, that we have to vote people who are pro book banning off school boards. That's the local push that we have to do.
It's interesting to me that in local elections, when I talk to my neighbors and so on, and if we're like-minded and open enough to discuss whether our differences are political or not, a lot of people tell me that they don't vote for the school board because they don't have children in the school board, and children in the school system, excuse me. And so, but I always think, wow, but they're the next generation of leaders. And if they're not getting a well-rounded education, then we are failing the next generation.
Right. That's a wonderful point, Pam, because, again, public education is the bedrock of democracy. And if we let it be dismantled, then democracy will be also. And I know that it can be scary to speak out. And I acknowledge that. But I would just counsel everybody who is hesitant to show up and speak out at school board meetings, march in the street. Let's do a Freedom to Read march on Washington.
Sure.
But people who are scared, and I've been through that. It can be scary.
Sure.
I would just say to everyone, take a moment to contemplate what it will be like if our democracy is destroyed, which is what the rabid right wants, because then we will not have the right to speak out. So we just have to, push ourselves to call everybody we know, like-minded people, because there is safety in numbers. There is safety and there is power in numbers. And I'm telling you, in Live Oak, if I can go there, so Orman and I were so sickened by what we saw in Lake City that we moved 17 miles away to a little town of Live Oak where we had really great friends and no books had been banned. So we did that and built a beautiful Cracker-style farmhouse in 1988. 1991, at an end of summer volleyball party, I discovered that a fundamentalist parent, Zeke Townsend, wanted the Suwannee County School Board to ban Of Mice and Men. And you know what? I was smarter, but I have to give Orman credit for so I was like, no way, not again. And he said, he's such a wag. He said, now, Claudia, you know, the root word in fundamentalist is fun. And that got me laughing so hard, restored my perspective. But I had learned that if you don't put together a grassroots coalition, you're not going to sway a school board. And so I made a long list of like-minded people, and they made a list of like-minded people. And that school board meeting was standing room only.
Good.
And Big Townsend and his faithful were on one side, and teachers and librarians and parents and students spoke out one after another. And the teachers who were too scared to speak out in Lake City, these teachers they spoke out so eloquently and so beautifully that they wanted their students to have the right to choose between, they don't want their choices in literature limited by one parent. So we're back to that, but mostly they want their children to have a full and rich education, which is, the bedrock of democracy. I keep coming back to that, but that is what's threatened. And if that doesn't make people want to speak out, I don't know what will, because,
I know that you have seen it as a political issue, and to a certain extent, I agree with you, because I see in my own state what's happening. But I have to believe that there are those who are not politically minded, as you might be, and may sit on the other side of the aisle, who also believe they want their children to have a well-rounded education. I think that I don't want to only engage one group and not another, because I really truly believe that for the most part, people are good. They may have a different way about how the government should run and all. But if you're a parent, I don't think you want anyone to take over your role and legislate how you parent, and including what your kids do for entertainment, what they read, what their subjects are. Shouldn't that be left to the parent, Claudia?
I absolutely.
Regardless of who it is.
Exactly. And let me just make a very interesting point here. First of all, I don't see book banning strictly as political. I'm just saying if we don't go and speak out in large numbers, we cede political power.
This is true.
That's what elected people understand.
Right.
But in Lake City, I was, I was labeled a Berkeley liberal because my master's in English is from Berkeley. But my three, Jim and Manya and Susan Davis, they were Republicans. They were Reaganite Republicans. So censorship makes strange bedfellows, and it doesn't, because it's about, when I first met Manya, she looked like Miss Kitty in Gunsmoke. And she dropped her cigarette on the sidewalk outside the school board meeting, and she just ground it out with her, strappy high heels. And she said, no preacher's going to tell my kid what they can read, and so we were a really mixed bag politically.
So you said something that's interesting. You talked about censoring, and I think that's it. I don't think anybody wants to have their views censored. There should be room at the table for everyone to have a discussion, but there is no room at the table for a unilateral decision that affects so many. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I catching what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. It's a rabid minority is making choices for the majority, and in the process they're destroying education and ultimately our democracy. So and the thing is, what was so beautiful about the Live Oak School Board meeting, and I want to just say that the penultimate chapter of Stifled Laughter is a verbatim transcription of the audio tape of that meeting, and then I rendered my thoughts. But it just is so moving how Susie Tuttle, who was our daughter's sophomore English teacher, um, she, she addressed Zeke Townsend as a fellow farmer and friend, and found it's we're not going to get anywhere until we find common ground.
Commonality. Mm-hmm.
In that moment, his side of the room, they shifted uncomfortably because it was very disarming, and it sort of took the heat out of the moment
Sure.
because they were fellow farmers and friends. And she said, and we both want what's best for our daughters, but she said, what you want for your daughter may not be what I want for mine. And so she asked the school board, she said, I just want to preserve, the right to choose for our students.
And that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
That's it. That is
It's
it.
the right to choose. If you don't want your child to read something, don't allow them to read it, but don't forbid anybody else to read it. That is it in a nutshell. I don't want my kid on TikTok. Well, I'm going to tell my kid, you're not on TikTok, or give me the phone and you're not having it back. There has to be a right of parents and a right of students to choose together. The parents and the student choose what is best for them.
Absolutely.
I don't think parents unilaterally make decisions. Once a child understands what reasoning is and can have a conversation with their parents about books, about music, about entertainment, about lifestyle, about anything else. And, unfortunately, everyone talks about cancel culture, and I don't think that's what this is. This isn't canceling. This is taking away someone's right to learn. And that is scary.
It is. And it's the more ignorant we are, the more easily we can be taken over by theocracy and fascists. I mean, to take away someone's right or someone's children's right to read a book is fascist. I mean, it's a use of force to impose your will. And I cannot imagine anywhere in the United States now, especially in this climate, where a teacher or a librarian would not say, if a parent asked, I want my student to have an alternate text. It's done all the time.
Sure.
And so then you don't have to read Of Mice and Men. You can choose something else off the summer reading list or whatever. And that is the way forward. That is the way forward.
Choice. Always choice.
Always choice.
Okay.
And so the student, the parent who is offended, it's like, where is it written that we won't be offended? I mean, everybody's offended by something everywhere, and that is not in the First Amendment.
It does seem like we're awful touchy these days, right?
Right.
Some people are awful touchy about everything these days. You have to grow a thick skin and choose your battles and not deny anybody else's right. Claudia Johnson, I am so happy that I'm talking to you, because it's such a timely reissue of your book, Stifled Laughter. I want to remind everyone that you get this from Books Anywhere. Claudia is, she's also my friend, but when we agree on so much about books and the importance of them, part of this is a memoir and part of it is classroom drama. I think it'll be there waiting for you. You have the choice to get it. Right, Claudia?
Absolutely. You have the choice. And it is a funny book. I mean,
it's funny book, and it's not big, by the way. It's only 180 pages, and you'll breeze through them pretty fast. But I promise you want to go back and read it again, because there are little details that you're going to miss on the first pass, which is why sometimes I'll read a book on a Kindle, and then I have to say, nah, I got to get the print now, because now I want to go through it line by line. It's too easy to flip through on a Kindle. And I'm a big reader, as I know you are.
I know. And I would just also say, I love that you brought up it's a memoir, because it is the story of how profoundly my family and I were changed and empowered during the 5 years of my fighting for freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed them. It changed. My husband came around. He said, they'll be burning crosses. He became one of the great advocates, he was the one who said the root word of fundamentalist is fun, So anyway, Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you
thank
so much for being
you.
with
Thank
me.
you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we got to do this. And
I
will
am
you come back again? And by the way,
Of
will you
course.
come back and interview an author of your choice?
Oh, wow. Yes, at some point, absolutely.
Okay,
Let's caucus and
let's
see
do
what.
that.
Yeah,
Let's
that
do
would be
that.
amazing.
I want to thank everyone for being with us today. The opinions expressed on this show are solely of the host and the guest. If you don't agree, by all means, write to me and tell me. If you do agree, write to me and tell me. And
Yeah.
if you liked what Claudia had to say, please go and get her book, Stifled Laughter. This is a conversation that's not over, and I hope to go back to time and time again. Thank you so much for being with me, Claudia.
And thank you. I just enjoyed every minute.
Thank you.